Hello, it's Dawn Michelle and welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to talk about my February wrap-up, all the things that I got into in February, some of the decks that I worked with, some of the journaling that I did, and other random-y things that I got up to throughout the month. I'll leave timestamps for everything below so you can check out whatever it is that you want to see. So let's start with memories first, just because there's not a ton, but there's a few things that were kind of key highlights for February. One of them is actually deck related, so I'm going to talk about that when we get to the deck section. But to start with, I just want to talk real quick about Baldur's Gate 3. Are y'all surprised, right? Playing that game with Lisa is completely just giving me life right now. What does boyfriend want today? That is what we do.
This is not going well.
We're fine. We're fine.
I'm all pointy ears, my love.
I'm in blood?
Yeah, and he liked it.
We're real good. Don't worry, you're
it's
gonna make out with me later. You just don't know it yet.
And it is the thing that we've both been doing to make sure that we are not overworking and that we are, it's helping us come out of that whole burnout that we've both talked about being in. I did a video on burnout. We did a tarot in practice over on Lisa's channel talking about burnout. And it's been, I think, a really big topic for a lot of people. I know a lot of you have reached out talking about how you've experienced burnout and what you've been dealing with going through that as well. So it's really nice to know that we're not alone in this, right? Memories. Back to Baldur's Gate. How did I get off of Baldur's Gate, right? How did that even happen? We got our cameo back from Neil. So Neil Newbon is the voice actor for Astarion, who is the character that we have pretty much wrapped our entire game around. And he was really great about playing along with the whole sort of shenanigan thing that we have going on in that playthrough. I clipped it together into some fun stuff, and it was such a fun experience. I'll leave a link below so you can go check it out. I'll talk a little bit about some of the shows that we've been watching. Actually, we haven't been watching a ton. I'll be honest. We watched the new Avatar: The Last Airbender, which was good, but I have personal attachment to that cartoon. So it's based on the cartoon, Nickelodeon cartoon, and that's something that we used to watch with our kids all the time, and particularly our oldest. So I kind of have a personal attachment to that whole series anyway. And while I think that some of the choices and some of the actors were really, really good, some of them kind of fell a little bit flat for me. So it was enjoyable, but not the same, right? Not the same. It's not going to ever be that same experience anyway, but it was definitely an enjoyable thing to sit and watch. We've also been watching the new Halo, the newest season of Halo. Outside of that, Critical Role, always watching Critical Role, right? That's just a thing. That's a thing we do around here. The other big thing, the other big memory, and I will probably talk about it more when I go through decks and stuff, but another big memory was that in my membership we're doing this sort of D&D inspired tarot practice. So it's not D&D, but it is definitely D&D inspired. We use cards, we use dice. We have a overarching story, a campaign that I've written that we're following. And in February, we did our first live game, which was so much fun. Again, it was a play off of D&D, not D&D, but a play off of it. We did use dice, we did use cards. We basically all got together in a big group and we went through this experience of freeing the Fate Singer, which was a character in the campaign that I'd created. And we got to all work together to do that. We pulled cards around it. We did some readings around it, and it was a lot of fun. We're going to be doing lots more game style get-together lives like that. I'll be doing some more lives in my membership just in a general sense as well. And that was a really fun, really exciting thing. It was the first one, so we did it kind of a little bit smaller, a little bit more condensed, just to give people an opportunity to kind of get to know the whole idea behind it and what we're going to be doing. And so as we move forward, we'll be doing a little bit longer games, a little bit bigger experiences, and it all ties into the overarching story that we're doing in the membership this year at the Weaver tier. If you're also just interested in my extra behind the scenes personal videos where I talk more about my personal life, my personal tarot practice, all that kind of stuff, I do also have a secret tier, which is just the extra videos. Yeah, so it was exciting. February, it's a short month, right? But I did some stuff in February and I made some connections and I had some personal struggles. That's a thing, man. That's a thing. And it's there was kind of some shadowy stuff happening, which I might talk about more at some point, because I think that that's an interesting experience to talk about. I tend to talk more openly and candidly in membership space about stuff like that, but I will try to touch upon that here because it is relevant to what I'm doing in this space as well. So it does, like, whatever's going on in my personal tarot practice tends to be reflected through the videos that I make everywhere. So I try to stay pretty much like in alignment with what's actually going on, with the exception of things like if I do a little collection or I do playing with pairs or, VR or something like that. Those are just kind of one-off things. So I think that was like the main things that I wanted to touch upon. So let's go ahead and we're going to swap to the other camera and take a look at all the stuff, the decks and my tarot journals, and talk a little bit about what I've been doing in those spaces throughout the month of February. We're going to take a look at the decks I worked with first in the Fellowship, which is the guided tarot journey that I am doing in the Weaver membership of my channel. So let's start with these three. We have the Compendium of Witches here, which is a mass market deck, and then I have two indie decks. This one is the Tree Whispers. Oh my goodness. Yes, I think that's the name of that deck. I have edged mine. I cannot remember which edition that is. My apologies. I'll try to look it up. And then here I have my Tree Spirit Tarot. And these were the main decks that I worked with for that practice. And you'll see what that actually looked like when we take a look at my Fellowship journal. So to start with, I'm just going to talk about each of these decks in turn and kind of like how I use them. So this particular deck, the Tree Spirit Tarot, it's a really cool deck. I am not super huge into just straight up photography decks where like there's no sort of digital manipulation happening. I'm a digital artist by trade, so I like digital manipulation. Just a photograph is generally not my thing when it comes to working with a tarot deck. I tend to like more. But the thing is, with this deck, there is so much more here than just the picture of the tree, especially if you have the guidebook. Now, the deck guidebook combo is kind of spendy. It's all indie products, but I really do think that it's worth getting the guidebook for if you're going to be working with this deck, at least for me, because I don't know anything about these trees. But we do have the tarot associations at the top. The suits have all been renamed, of course, to correspond with, the tree theme. We have nuts and evergreens and fruit trees. And what's the other one? Hardwoods. And then at the bottom here, we also have what type of tree it is and a keyword. And I think that this is really where this deck shines for me. I love trees. Like, I live in the Pacific Northwest, man. I'm surrounded by trees. I love trees. I'm allergic to half of them, but I still love them anyway. I love bringing the tree energy in with this particular deck because it works really well. I really appreciate the keywords. That's been super handy for me. I often have to look up like what the Earth Keeper of Hardwoods is because I can't ever remember what court card that corresponds to, but that's okay because I always get into the guidebook for this deck, because the guidebook is quite meaty and lovely when it comes to working with this tree energy. Well, we will take a look at the guidebook because I definitely want to share that with you. I think the photographs are actually really beautiful in this deck as well, but it's really about the information that comes through the guidebook for me. I'll be perfectly honest. The cards are just kind of there to create that connection between what I'm going to read about in the guidebook. So it's a lovely picture, sure, but what I'm looking at here is this Two of Hardwoods with, I think is the Two of Swords, if I remember correctly. The tree is ebony and the keyword is clarity. That is definitely what I'm going to be keying into when I'm working with this deck, not so much the picture. So unlike a lot of other decks that I work with, the visuals in this are kind of like secondary for this particular deck, because I really feel like the strength of this deck for me comes through working with what I find in the guidebook. Now, oftentimes, I'll be honest, that's a turnoff for me when it comes to tarot, because like while I can read this one, like here's the devil. I know what the devil means. Guardian of Hardwoods. Hardwoods, I believe, is swords. Guardian, like I could remember. Here's a better one, like nuts, the Eight of Nuts, right? I can read the tarot just fine. Like I can use this as just any other tarot deck, and it totally would work fine. But for me, the strength of this deck actually comes through the writing that's in the guidebook. And so that means that the cards are actually kind of secondary, which means that I'm using them as like, this is my reading, the Hanged Man, the Nine of Hardwoods, and the Hierophant. And I can look at this and go, okay, Hanged Man, yep, note that means Nine of Hardwoods. Again, I think that's the Nine of Swords. And the Hierophant. Perfect. I can do a reading based on that. The visuals, the trees do nothing for me. Like, and I don't mean that in any sort of disrespectful way. It's just I get nothing visually off of working with this deck. For me, it comes through these tarot associations, the keywords, and then getting into the guidebook. So let's go ahead and jump into the guidebook, because I really feel like that's where the strength of this deck lies. I put that right in my way. Love when I do that. So this, the deck came off of either Make Playing Cards, or I think it was Printer Studio, maybe. Again, I'll link everything below. The guidebook I got off of Amazon. And again, these are indie products, so they are quite spendy, just to let you know. But I do really feel like it's worth it to get into this guidebook. There's a lot of information about trees, about tree spirit wisdom. It's very, very well written, and I really enjoy working with it in this way. So let me jump into, like, so here's the Lovers with Myrtle and Harmony. And the thing I love is it tells a lot about the plant, the tree that we're looking at, right? And that for me is often the missing piece when working with plant energy decks, because I don't know a lot about them. So for me, that's really helpful to have that information in there. We also have a bit of information about the Tarot Association, which is fantastic, which again, this author relates back to the tree. I find that really, really helpful. There's a message for the card, which is kind of like our divinatory takeaway, and a challenge, which I really, really love. And I do believe that that is the whole layout from the majors to the minors, which I really appreciate. There's just as much information in here on the minor arcana as there is the majors. So for each one, we have what it is, what it relates to, the keyword. We have about the plant or the tree that we're looking at. Again, that message, how it relates to the tarot, and that challenge. And I just find that this for me is where the potency of this deck lies. The visuals, the imagery is secondary. The tarot is, of course, you know, pulling this into reading. That tells me what energy of the tarot I'm working with. I can layer in that keyword, which is fantastic. And then I get into the guidebook, and that's where the meat and potatoes is of this deck for me. It's not so much in the visuals as it would be any other deck. And the reason I'm kind of like harping on that and making a really big point of that is because sometimes for me, the strength of a tarot deck is actually in the guidebook, and sometimes it's the other way around, right? And I shouldn't say just tarot, because that is not specifically just a tarot thing. Case in point for this oracle deck that I worked with. And I'll show you these all together here in a moment, but I just kind of want to go through and talk about each of them individually. Here's the beautiful backs of this. I have edged mine. I absolutely love this deck. For me, however, though, it's the complete opposite of the Tree Spirit Tarot, because this for me is very much an intuitive reader. It is all about the imagery. It is all about the guardians as I see them, the faces in these trees. And the keywords just kind of help me take that even one step deeper. But I could honestly work with this deck without any of the keywords. Now, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the keywords. I think they're amazing. It's a fantastic assortment of keywords, and they're always so spot on when I bring them into a reading. But this deck, the way it reads for me, it is so intuitive. It's such a felt experience working with this deck that I feel like it's a communion between me and these sort of tree spirit, tree guardians that are depicted on the cards. And I don't really need the keywords, and I don't need a guidebook, because I get everything I need out of working with the visuals. It's more of an energetic thing for me than it's more of, like, as I've always saying, that felt experience. This is felt experience in a deck. This, to me, this deck, it's more study. It's more logical brain. It's more mind, in the mind space, where this is more in the feeling space, right? So one of them taps into my emotional landscape, and the other one taps into my mental landscape. And I think that's why, for me, they work so well together. Let me just go ahead and do a little flippy here. Like, let's do the usual. Like, why not? I'm not that out of practice that I can't remember how to do this, right? This little combo I really like for this reason, because I feel like the Tree Spirit Tarot really taps into the mindset of what's going on. Even when I'm looking at, maybe the Suit of Cups or cards that I would relate more to a emotional landscape, it still sits in the space of being more of a deck of the mind for me. It gives me something to think about. There's something to learn here. It's more about that taking in information than it is about living through the experience of the reading. And that's where the tree whisper comes in for me. That is living through the experience of the reading. That is feeling it. This is where the emotion lies. That's where the emotional connection is in this particular little pairing for me. Now, if I take these decks and put them in different pairings, they might feel completely different. But working with them together, it's a really interesting and very potent combo, because I feel like I'm getting that heart and mind connection through these two decks. And together, we've got that tree energy, so we can layer that in too, which is amazing. And we've got this sort of guide, spiritual sort of layer coming through the oracle. So it's a really interesting combo of the magical and the mundane, the heart and the mind. And something about the way these two decks read together in that way for me really taps very succinctly into those two spaces, and really shows me how to balance those. And even though I was using them for very specific prompts in very specific ways in the fellowship, I was also playing with them in this way too, where I'm looking at exploring what's the emotional underpinning of the situation, and what, in that sense, what's the magical and the spiritual within the mundane. And then here we get what's the sort of mindset around that, and what do I need to know about it, right? So they worked really well in that particular way for me. Then I used the Compendium of Witches, and I used this in a very specific way. It's kind of one of the reasons why I have this deck, because of its particular structure. So I've got my deck. This one is a mass market deck. I've got this one divided up. So here's the backs, which are quite lovely. I love this cardstock too. It's great. This deck has kind of a structure where it has the witches, or the guides, as I like to see them, in one stack. And then we have kind of these sort of Lenormand-esque cards where it's kind of like, objects or things or whatever. And so how I was working with this was using them very, very separately, as in I would lay them down for very specific purposes and in very specific positions, but also working with them together and then working with them with the rest of the decks. I would say you would see that in my journal, but my journal's all writing. So we're just going to take a look at the visuals here, and then we'll take a look at the writing. So whenever in the fellowship we came across in the month of February a figure, an NPC, if you will, a non-player character, which we have several of in the fellowship, whenever we came across another character in our journey, I was using this in February to represent that character. The artist was one that came up for me. That was my main oracle that I was working with. Oracle as in a person, the oracle, right? My oracle was the artist, which was the person who was guiding me through the month of February. And anytime we had any sort of NPC where we had somebody else, a figure, a guide, a archetype that we were working with in the fellowship, I would pull from the selection of these witches here, because I think they're beautiful. I really, really enjoy the energies and the archetypes that are represented in this deck, and I thought they worked really, really well for that. So every week we also pull, at the end of most weeks, we pull a loot card, which is something that we're working with all throughout the entire year. And these are kind of like our takeaway from each of the weeks, and then we will combine that into a big thing at the end of the year. But I was using this section of the cards for my loot, and pulling in, actually not so much the titles, but getting into the guidebook and looking at the keywords, because that's what we need to work with for that particular practice that we're doing in the fellowship. And I was pulling these for my loot, and occasionally I was pulling these for additional messages or expansions upon a message with the other decks. So combining these all together was really cool, and I really enjoyed working with them in that way. But I definitely always keep these two decks, or this deck, split up like this, because like I feel like it works really well. I can pull a guide. I think I've talked about this before, but I also use the deck in this way, where I pull a guide and then I pull this almost like Lenormand style reading around it, right? Where I have the guide, and this is my message from the guide, which is Briar, Oath, and Shell. Most of the time I do have to get into the guidebook to see what these things mean. or what they are supposed to mean in the context of the deck. I can tell you what they mean to me personally, and sometimes that's a layer that I work with that's totally fine, totally valid to just go with your own intuitive hits. But I do enjoy working with a guidebook with this deck. And so a lot of times if I'm like, kind of just need a message, like I'll pull these, and I'll pull a guide, and I'll pull a sort of Lenormand-esque style message with these cards, and it works really, really beautifully. So all together, like these decks all together were fantastic for my fellowship. The kind of point of the quest for February was around an elder tree. So having this really foundational tree energy was fantastic. It worked really well. And then I was kind of pulling in this little bit of witchy Lenormand-esque divining sort of energy, because that was something that we did in the quest. We used the scrying pool, and this worked really well for that because it kind of fits in alignment with that energy. But then also using these two in the way that I talked about was amazing. I did work with these two outside of the fellowship. This one I don't think I used outside of that. So I think that was very specific into those particular prompts and those particular practices. But these two I did get into quite a bit here and there, just to do some little readings around some very specific little things. And I really love working with the two of them together. Alrighty, we're going to kind of do things a little bit out of order. I will leave timestamps below in case you want to, jump around to just what you're interested in. But since, as I just talked about my fellowship decks, I thought maybe it would be great to just go ahead and take a flip through this journal. This is the journal that I'm specifically using for following the fellowship. I'm not putting any card images in here. In fact, the cover for each month's quest guide is really the only image that I'm putting in these journals. I've got some stickers and stuff going on, but I don't have any card images because I'm doing all those digitally. What I'm doing with this is really focusing on the actual experience. So what I've got is all of the narrative that I write in the PDFs and the quest guide is all written in here. And it all shows up in brown, which is really hard to see, but this whole journal is color coded for me. So we have our initiative, which is the thing that we start each week with. And then we have an encounter, which is a sort of an activity, a spread, a prompt. We are using dice. I forgot to show my dice that I was using. Let's do that really quick. Whoop, not that one. So right now we're just using 3 dice from a typical Dungeons and Dragons dice set. We're only just focusing on the 3 right now. We might add in more because it does come with, I believe, 7 total. So we are using the D20. Ooh, rolled a 1. The D6, which is your standard cube, and then the D4, and those are the main ones that we're using. So every month I swap my dice out to whatever I feel like matches the energy that we're working with. So these were the 3 that I was using for February, which is lots of fun. Put those back for right now. So anyway, yeah, we have our encounter, and that tends to be where we do the most work with dice, and we do kind of activities and spreads and things like that. And then, like I said, at the end of every week, we pull a loot card, or most weeks, I should say. So yeah, just looking through here, you can see like it is mostly just writing. There are some few little stickers that I do here and there. I have some stamps. So whenever I roll a dice, I have shaped stamps that I relate. So this was a D20 that I rolled, and I rolled a 4, and here was the message that came with that. Some of that I have written in the guides, and some of that is stuff that comes from other things that we do. So we moved into the prophecy, and this is where we learned overarching quests that we're doing. So every month has its own sort of little quest, but every month also ties into the larger yearly quest that we are doing to do this whole adventure. And yeah, it's been really fun. So here I rolled a D4 and I got a 4. You can see my cards and all of that. And then here we're into the last week. So I'm really just focusing on the writing in this. It's not like a huge decorative thing, as you can see. But yeah, we also did a side quest, which was really fun. We did a live side quest where a whole bunch of us got together and we worked together using our dice and tarot to free the Fate Singer. And we got some loot out of that. So we got a thing that we can now use in our monthly practice. So that was really fun. We did that live, and it was a really good time. We're definitely going to be doing more of those. We have some more side quests. We have some big sort of seasonal events that we're going to be doing in relation to this whole questing thing that we've got going on, and it's been loads of fun. Now let's talk about this big pile of decks that I got going on here, because these are the primary decks that I worked with for everything else throughout the month. It all started with this one, and I did a whole member video talking about how this deck in particular was the deck that helped me get through my tarot burnout and how that whole experience went. This is the Notoria Tarot in Light, aka the boyfriend deck. There's a little bit of a story behind that. It does relate to live streaming Baldur's Gate 3 with Lisa over on my other channel. I'll leave a link to that below if you want to check it out. It's just crazy chaos and good fun. But this is the deck that it's actually become known as the boyfriend deck, which is amazing. Like, y'all are amazing. I love it. It is technically an angel deck, and this deck started for me of me just happening to see it online when I was in the full midst of tarot burnout. Like, I was deep in it, y'all. Deep in it. And I happened to see this deck, and I was like, that kind of looks like Boyfriend, aka Astarion from Baldur's Gate 3, which is the game that Lisa and I are playing. And we call him Boyfriend, and that is his pet name. And so this, to me, I saw it, and I was like, oh, that looks like Boyfriend. So I bought it just because I was like, really looking for anything to kind of re-spark my connection to tarot, because I was in full burnout mode. I did a video talking about it on my channel. I'll link it below. Lisa and I did a tarot in practice talking about it on her channel, where we talked very, very openly and candidly about burnout and our individual experiences with it and how we found our way kind of working through that. For me, this deck has been the bridge back into my tarot practice, because it was, when I got it in, I was like really excited to play with it. And I didn't want to put it down, and it was a whole thing. It was a whole mood, and I really have developed this quite personal attachment to this deck. Yes, they say it's my Astarion deck, it's boyfriend deck, right? But really what I've discovered that this deck represents for me is light in any given situation. It's hope, it's light. It's interesting because also I've talked about it before, it's kind of bitey, it's kind of pokey, and like that's just totally fitting for boyfriend deck. But I've had several people ask, what the heck is a boyfriend deck and why do you keep talking about it? This is a boyfriend deck because when I first saw it, it made me think of that particular character in the game who Lisa and I lovingly call Boyfriend. I'm not sure we've used his name in like 3 weeks now. He has a name, it's Astarion, but we just call him Boyfriend. And that's his pet name. And this is the deck that we now call Boyfriend deck, which we both have. And I think a lot of you have this deck as well now. I know in particular several of you who are playing Baldur's Gate 3 as well and are doing kind of similar to Lisa and I. And you've got this deck now and you call it Boyfriend deck, which makes me so happy. I love seeing so many people with Boyfriend deck now. I love seeing so many people make that connection. Because again, I feel like it's a shared experience that we're having together, and it's amazing. But at the end of the day, underneath all of that, what this deck represents for me is light. It represents hope. And sometimes that light isn't always, like, it's not always without its challenges, right? And I really love that this deck just encapsulates that for me. I still call it my boyfriend deck. If I say I'm going to do work with boyfriend, this is pretty much what I mean. Unless I'm like literally going to jump in game and do something with boyfriend with Lisa. That's the thing that happens too, weekly, if not twice a week when we can. But every week, every Tuesday evening, we live stream that game. So it's been fantastic because this is the thing. This is the deck. This is the deck that helped me get through my tarot burnout. It was the deck that I was able to make a connection to beyond tarot, beyond personal growth, beyond looking at tarot as just a tool. Because it started out as just a fun thing. I've just said, gee, this looks like boyfriend, and I'm just going to play with it. And then I realized that, like, over time, I had developed a reading around this. I've developed a relationship to it, and it's become actually a really important part of my tarot practice. I work with this deck daily. It is a daily deck now for me, and I think that that's fantastic. Here's the beautiful backs of it. So I got curious and was like, there's another deck. I think this one might have actually come first, but I could be wrong. So it was a curiosity because I completely fell in love with the Notoria deck. I decided to pick up the Goetia. These are both actually all of these decks that I'm about to share with you are mass market decks. So they're all fairly affordable and fairly readily available. So the Goetia is a demon deck. It's the Tarot in Darkness. And here's the beautiful backs. This one for me, again, similar to Boyfriend deck, I developed a particular attachment to this deck and what it represented. I call this my Dark Urge deck because, again, tying back into that video game, there is a type of character that you can play that is called the Dark Urge, or Dirge as it's commonly known in the gaming community. And it's a particular play style. It's a particular character and it's a particular play style, and it has a very unique story, and it is quite dark. And so for me, I realized once I got this deck in hand, I was like, oh, this is my Dirge deck. The characters that I have played the majority of in that game have been Dirge characters, so it's very fitting. But again, similar to Boyfriend, I realized, similar to the Boyfriend deck, I should say, I realized that what this deck actually represents for me is the shadow. And by shadow, I don't necessarily mean negative, bad, evil, terrible things. What I mean is that which is unseen, that which is unacknowledged and unrealized. That's just my own personal interpretation of what shadow means to me in my life and how I work with it. So it's not necessarily a negative thing. It's not necessarily bad. It's just a unrealized, untapped into, unacknowledged thing, whether that's a part of self, a part of an experience, a part of whatever it is. And this deck just is amazing for that. It so succinctly taps into that. Now, Lisa and I have gone into down a whole rabbit hole of also starting to pull in the information and the associations of the actual angels and demons, because on both of these decks, every card is associated with a demon in the Goetia and an angel in the Notoria. And so we have started going down that rabbit hole of looking at it through that lens as well, and exploring that. But for right now, what I've been using these decks for and what they've represented for me the whole month long has been the light and shadow in whatever it is, situation, feeling, thought, whatever it is. And they really do work beautifully together. I did a whole video with my members talking about how I work with actually all of these decks together. If you are in the Seeker membership or up, then you will be able to check that out. But together they are amazing for looking at light and shadow, because we have that sort of light energy represented through the Notoria and the shadow energy represented through the Goetia. Also, you can tap into the angel and the demon. The other cool thing that we discovered in our sort of rabbit hole down the angel and demon route is that every angel and demon has a correspondence. So every demon has an angel that oversees it in a way. Still finding my way through all this, but like it's its handler, for lack of a better word. So I've been experimenting with pulling one or the other and then finding the matching, not the matching tarot card, because the tarot associations change based on what reference you're looking at, but the angel and the demon. So if I were to pull, say, Raphael, that was one I got recently, then I would look up in my reference books that I'm currently using, I would look up Raphael and I would see which demon is associated with that, and then I would pull that from this deck, or the other way around. I might pull a demon first and then look up the angel associated with it, and then I can dive into that and look at how those two work together. Again, I did a member video really going into quite some detail about that and how I'm planning on using that moving forward in March, because exploring these two decks through the angel and demon lens is something I'm just starting to get into. So it's not something that I feel like I can talk about in great detail because I have not really worked with them yet. That's kind of my plan for March. For February, I've been working with them in light and shadow, and that's been really, really key and spot on. Again, also Boyfriend, Dark Urge, like that's a whole layer I put in there as well. But these two decks together are amazing, and I love them. I work with both of these decks daily. I at least pull one card from each every single day, and I think I have all throughout February. It's definitely a practice I'm going to be continuing in March. They pretty much never leave my table. They stay in a stack on my table next to my planner and my displacer bees, because those are the important things in my life right now. Lisa and I were just chatting one day, and I was like, I need a boyfriend oracle to go with my boyfriend deck, and this is the rabbit hole that we went down for this. Ended up buying a couple of different decks, and ended up working with these two in particular. Again, these are decks that I'm using for very specific readings in very specific ways, but I just kind of want to talk about, you know, just the decks in general at this point. Because I am still getting to know them. I am still working with them. Here's the backs of the Dante's Inferno. So this deck is really interesting. I think the artwork is really cool. Like, it super fits with the whole D&D vibe thing. It's gorgeous with these two decks. It works really well. The thing that I found with this particular deck, the keywords on the bottom, like sometimes they feel landscapey, sometimes they feel archetypal, sometimes they feel like a keyword, sometimes they feel like a key phrase. It's kind of a weird blend of what's going on down at the bottom of this deck. So I'll be perfectly honest, I haven't been paying a ton of attention to what's going on down here, other than using it as kind of a jumping off point for looking in the guidebook, because I do want to talk about the guidebook with this oracle deck. I've been using this deck in particular to represent the landscape of the reading. So whatever the reading is, it doesn't really matter what I'm doing the reading around. I'm working with all of these decks, really. I got this card multiple times. This card keeps coming up for me. This is the landscape. This is the energetic sort of, not foundation, but the energetic landscape. If I paint the whole situation with a broad brush, this is what I'm getting out of it. It doesn't feel super specific, which is great. It feels more open, more expansive in that way. And what I do is use this to kind of tell me what the landscape of the reading is. And then I get into the guidebook, because the keywords are kind of a miss for me in terms of being able to like practically use them in a reading. They just aren't working for me. And that's totally cool. Sometimes that happens. And that's fine when the guidebook actually picks up the slack. And this guidebook I really, really love. I get into it every time. It's written by Charles Harrington. And it is, it's beautifully written, and I really like the interpretations in here. So in each of the cards, we have, of course, the title. We have a little quote. We have where this card kind of sits in the journey of the story, right? And then we have the divinatory message. And like, this is perfect. This gives me exactly what I need to tap into the landscape of the reading. This is one of those cases that I am a little bit reliant on the guidebook, and I'm okay with that, because the guidebook is really well written and I get exactly what I need. So as far as this deck creating that landscape for a reading for me, like, it just works so well. And I really do like the imagery. I think the imagery really conveys a lot of depth of feeling as well. And it does feel very landscapey in its depiction. So like, it works for that. But it's really where between adding in the imagery and then really getting into that guidebook is where this deck is really shining for me. And it goes really beautifully with the other two decks that I've been working with. The other deck that I've been working with, this whole creation of deck family that I've got going on here, is the Mausolea. Hopefully that's the correct pronunciation. The Oracle of Souls. I do believe this creator is working on a tarot. Like, I'm pretty sure I saw it somewhere, and I am super excited. So I cannot wait for that. So this deck, here's the beautiful backs. Different than the Dante's Inferno, this deck to me feels very archetypal. It is full of guides. That's how I use this deck, is I pull this to get a guide. So we have Hades, Abaddon, Chiron, the Leper King. And we do have 3 keywords. So you know me and my keywords, I often pull that into the readings as well. And sometimes I'll use that as spread positions. And it's been a really fun one to kind of like leave a reading with, to give me a guide to help me on my journey. The artwork also super compatible. It looks beautiful with everything I've been working with. And the guides are always so spot on. They're like just the person I need, or the archetype or the energy that I need to kind of help see me through this situation. And I really enjoy working with this one. I love the art. I love the titles, because it is archetypal, so I'm good with the titles, but I love that it has the keywords down at the bottom. It just so opens up the whole experience of working with the deck, because now I can work with it in multiple ways, which I really appreciate. The guidebook, however, y'all, the guidebook is, It's a disappointment, I'll be honest. The thing the guidebook does really well is if you don't know who this person is, that's where this guidebook shines. There's not really anything in the way of divinatory message in the guidebook, so you're kind of like left to your own interpretations there. You can kind of, you know, pull some pieces and parts out of what's written in here in terms of who the character is. But as far as like having any sort of divinatory message, I haven't found that it really works that way. So I've gotten into it a few times just on the rare occasion that I didn't know who some of these people were, but most of these are very familiar archetypes. They're very familiar gods or goddesses or energies that I'm already familiar and comfortable with. So it works really well for me because they're already in my repertoire, so to speak. And when they're not, I can look into the guidebook and get some more information, which is fantastic. I am playing with new camera setups, y'all. So I've redone my whole space, and it's a thing. Hopefully this works well. So let me just show you how these all look together. We're going to do this real quick because it takes a lot of time to flip through cards like this. But I love working with these decks together. I think they look beautiful. They work beautifully together. We'll just flip through a few of them just so you can see how we're kind of getting this whole energy working together. This is not a great way to do this, but it's what we're doing, what we're going with. I'm just not really in a great position to be pulling cards, this many cards at one time, right? But yeah, I think you can see how like aesthetically they are all sitting in the same world, and I love it. And like I do have very specific ways that I work with these decks, very specific readings that I'm doing with these decks, and so that's been really fun to play with them. Again, I did a whole member video on that, really kind of diving deep into what I've been doing with these crazy decks. I love them. I really don't foresee these decks leaving my table in March, I'll be honest. I know for a fact that the Notoria and the Goetia, Boyfriend and Dark Urge, they're going nowhere. They're still going to be hanging out with me because I still have lots and lots of work that I want to do with them. The other two, the two oracles, I pull them in as needed when I'm doing bigger readings or looking for specific information or support, and they work really well for that. But I'll tell you what, the Boyfriend and Dark Urge, man, they're going nowhere because that's a huge thing that's a part of my life right now, and I just really need to be tapping into that. Also, I'm, going down the rabbit hole of the angels and demons with them. So the last deck that I'm going to be talking about is one that I've talked about at length on my channel, and this is the Diablo Tarot. I thought about not including it because I've talked about it many, many times, and very recently in a video talking about my feeling decks. But like the whole point of these videos is to talk about, or these monthly reflections, is to talk about and share the decks that I am actually working with, the ones that I used, right? It's not a first impression. It's not a flip through. This is how I actually worked with these decks, what I actually used throughout the month. And so I feel like I would be doing a disservice not only to myself but to you if I didn't include one. So here it is. Granted, I do have other decks that I will, like, for a very like one-off thing, pull a deck. And like if I included all of those, we'd be here forever. Although I'll be honest, in February I don't think I pulled any additional decks besides the ones that I'm showing you today. So it's a very odd month in that sense, where I'm just like, I just worked with the decks that you're seeing here, and I don't think I pulled anything else. I don't think I did. If I did, it was just once or maybe twice, and it was just an odd deck. But anyway, the whole point is to talk about the decks that I actually work with and how I found working with them. I've talked about this deck many times. Like, this deck is a whole mood. It's a whole thing for me. Again, similar to the Notoria and the Goetia, like I have a very specific personal attachment to this deck. I talked about it in my video on my feeling decks, and it sits in a very particular space for me. Now, I used this deck a lot throughout the month as an anchor. So I pulled one card and I would use that as my anchor card, and then I would pull all of these other decks around it for particular readings, depending on what I was doing with it. But this deck is another one that tends to come out quite a bit. There's something about this deck. It's just when I'm lost, when I'm feeling a little bit like I don't know what I'm doing anymore. This is the deck that I go to, and it's been really important one in my practice as I've been struggling with burnout that I've talked about many times now through many videos. I do definitely feel like I'm coming out the other side of burnout. I've got some really fun things planned for my channel, got some fun things planned for my membership. So definitely some fun things going on over on my other channel. I love this Lovers card. But this deck, man, it's a whole mood for me. I really love how it feels and it looks so gritty and raw and angry and ragey. I know a few people are using this as their rage deck, and I can totally see that. It would make an awesome rage deck. It's, for me personally, it's not my rage deck because I have other associations that I've built and a different relationship that I've established with this deck. But it does have this very like gritty, gruesome, kind of almost hopeless looking feel about it, right? And if you know the Diablo, like the lore around the Diablo story, the Diablo games in particular, then like it makes sense. But the thing for me with this deck is like, that's just surface level. And I love that idea. I love that it's gritty and unapproachable and kind of mean on the surface. But if you dig beneath that, there's so much substance here. There's so much feeling. There's so much guidance that I get out of working with these cards, and it really is about the artwork and the way that it translates to a felt experience for me. This is one of those decks that I've got such a personal attachment to it that I really don't need the guidebook. I'm gonna flip through the whole thing as I'm sitting here babbling. That's like how much I love this deck. I could sit here and just babble about this deck and how it works for me and how I feel about it like all day long, because it's such an amazing one. And that's a very me experience, right? Somebody else might pick up this deck or go, this deck is completely ugly, or this deck is too gritty and raw or gross. Like there's a lot of gross stuff in this deck, but like that's a gross card. Look at that 10 of Swords. It's disgusting, but I love it because that's just the surface level. The surface level is just disgusting. Underneath it, there's so much more going on, and I love it. Like, let's end on that 10 of Cups, because like that's a perfect, I think, embodiment of this deck for me. Like on the surface, like it's kind of gross, like she's being like blood poured over her, whatever, and there's like all this other stuff, there's all this chaos going on beneath the surface, and it's just, it's like two different dualities coming together, and I don't know, it just works for me, y'all. Like sometimes I just cannot articulate why a deck works, but I know it does, and this is one of them. So another journal that I've been working in is this little just notebook from the Creeping Moon. This is basically my other tarot slash art slash whatever I want to include in here journal. So I'll do a quick little flip through. There's not a ton in here because I don't work in here that often. It tends to be when there's something really significant or important that I want to remember. So I think I showed a little bit of this maybe last month. I can't remember. I did not do any sort of setup. I just like went right into like my sort of month ahead reading. This is a little energetic reading that I did for February. I used the Nameless One Tarot and Oracle and the Divine Ephemera Oracle. I'm going to talk about both of these decks probably maybe in March, because I've been working with them throughout the first half of the year, and I want to talk about them a little bit more in detail. So I'll probably do that then. But I just kind of pulled an energetic reading, a oracle card to sit with me through the month, and then 2 tarot to support it. I got Love and Passion with Aphrodite from the Divine Ephemera Oracle, and the 3 of Cups and the 9 of Cups. It was something great to try and strive for. I don't know that I quite hit it, but you know, it was definitely something that I was trying to keep in mind, something that I was working toward. So I apologize. There are bad words in this because this is my personal journal, and sometimes I swear. Okay, like a lot of times I swear. If you've watched my gaming stuff, you know I swear. It's kind of funny because this looks like the title of the reading or of this, maybe the spread that I did, but it's really not. I wrote that in after the fact, where I was like, I don't like this reading. I'm over it, because this was one of those readings that like when I did it, like it made me cry. It was a whole thing. I was going through a lot at the time I pulled these cards. And so when I put them in, I was just like, I was kind of just done. And it took me several days to keep coming back to this reading to really work my way through it. I have some very few reflections in here because most of what I worked through with this was very internal, right? And also, like, be honest, working through it with friends, like talking it out, verbally processing, as we say, that was a huge part of working through this reading. And it was a really profound and powerful reading, but like it kind of threw me for a loop as well. I had to take several days to sit with it. I did end up using my boyfriend deck, which is the Notoria Tarot and Light. I used the Pythonic Tarot, which is one that I use quite a bit, and then the Black Mirror Oracle, which is by the same creators, the Pythonic. I didn't share those this month because this is really just the only reading that I used them for. but they are decks that I've talked about before on my channel. Okay, so then I started actually incorporating other things into this, not just tarot. This was actually a drawing that I did in Procreate, and this is, of course, Astarion, aka boyfriend. And I'm doing a drawing practice where I am working on an art piece every single day. So I have several of them. Sometimes I sit and I do it for 20 minutes. Sometimes I do it for 2 hours. It just depends on what I've got going on and, you know, what the mood is. And I realized that while I'm focusing in on techniques, right? Each drawing has a particular technique that I'm focusing in on. This one I was trying to focus in on shadows. Although I always have like the thing I'm working on, right? I've done one around eyes. I've done one around arms. I've done one around lips. Like it's all basically people-y things because I'm trying to get better at drawing people because there's like a thing I want to do later on. Like it's a drawing technique where you just basically draw the same thing over and over again in different ways until you get better at it. So that's what I was doing. I picked a character. It started at the beginning of the year and like jokingly we were like, oh, I'm going to do Astarion. And then I was like, yeah, actually I am. And it just stuck. So anyway, this one was a focus in on shadow. But what I also realized as I was doing this whole practice is that every time I do one of these drawings, I am drawing my feelings with his face. So I've talked about before, like, I'm not great with the squishy, man. That's not my thing. I'm working on that. It's definitely a thing I'm trying to work on and work through and get better about. Being more open and vulnerable and squishy, as we call it, particularly with, you know, not with everybody, man, because boundaries are important, but with certain people and with certain things in my life. And then I realized that a lot of times as I was doing these, yes, it's a shadow, it's a focus in on shadows. That's the technique that I was focusing in on. But I also realized that at the time I did this drawing, I was also drawing my feelings using his face. It's kind of a joke, but it's also like not, because I literally draw my feelings with his face because sometimes I have trouble verbally expressing my feelings. But art I can do. This I can do. I may not be able to tell you that I'm feeling scared and sad and vulnerable and like I need to hide from everything for a little bit, but I can express that through all of this. And the only reason I'm able to verbally express that now is because I've done the work around this, right? So this almost becomes like a little mini oracle reading in itself, because I draw a thing and then I look at, sure, the technique that I used to draw it, but then I also look at, like, why did I draw that thing? Why did I draw this particular scene? Why did I draw it in this particular way? What does that say about what's going on within my internal landscape? And that's kind of what this drawing is for me. And a lot of these drawings end up being is a sort of external reflection of my internal landscape. And so I added that in here because that was actually like a really significant realization that I came to throughout the month of February, you know, January and February, but really like it really came to the forefront in February for sure. Especially I think with this particular one, which is why I put it in here. Okay, then this was just a reading that I did. I did a member video talking about how this reading goes. It's a spread that I created, a light and shadow spread. Also kind of looking at getting from here to there. That's kind of the thing. Like, here's where I am, here's where I'm trying to get to, and here's what I need to know for it. So I've got that in here. And then I just wrote my reflections in here. And then this was an art piece that I did. So this is the words are, I don't know. It's not really a poem. It's just a thing. It's just a little vignette into my brain, I guess. And I was writing about having trouble writing. And so that's what I wrote. I drew this in Procreate and then, you know, wrote my words over the top of it and basically took my words and my art and created this art piece out of it. And so I printed that off and put that in here so that I would have it. Again, it's not tarot related at all. This is a piece that I wrote when I was struggling to write. And so that's now a piece in here. And you can see that, like, this is more than just a tarot journal. It's just a journal of anything that is meaningful to me in the moment. And then I decided to do this little wrap up for February, just for fun, because this is like, I think I've mentioned it many times, like there's certain things that are just like giving me life, getting me through the day, right? And so I put some pictures in of things that I'd taken. These are all like on my Instagram too, but I put some pictures in of some things I've taken, some stickers. I've got like a D20. This is from my fellowship. A little Astarian approves, because yes, that's still very much a thing. But I also, you know, wrote down a few key things that were kind of keeping me grounded and keeping me connected. Like I said, giving me life, like keeping me connected to myself and my friends and the things that are important to me. So, you know, I have playing Baldur's Gate 3 with Lisa. We're live streaming that on my other channel. My boyfriend decks, which this is kind of the whole collection of my boyfriend decks. I didn't write it down, but this is my little Displacer Beast Nessa, and she's just a thing. She hangs out with me on my desk all the time, and she tends to kind of like hang out with me like I'm editing videos and things like that. Drawing, of course, which I've already talked about. The fellowship, I talked about that as well. So, and just, you know, some things, these are some of the books that I've read. I may do a separate video on books and just to talk about, you know, those. I don't want to put them in here because then that's just going to be, it's going to be a lot. So I'm trying to kind of maybe piece out certain things, let this be more of an overall reflection, and then maybe I'll piece out some certain things and talk about them more in detail. If you'd like to hear more, definitely let me know in the comments below, like the kind of things you want to hear about on my channel. And then I just, you know, made a little note about how I was feeling about February come the end of it. And that's it. And I'm ready to move into March. I do plan on doing another energetic reading for March. So that's definitely something that I'm going to do. Allowing myself to play in here whenever something feels significant. So it's not my everyday pulls. It's not every reading I do. It's just when things feel particularly significant. That's what I'm putting in here. And I'm really enjoying it. And I'm not just limiting it to tarot, which has been really great. It's been a long time since I've had a journal that I just put like whatever in it, and I just really don't like try to keep it in a particular theme, and that's been really fantastic. I've really enjoyed diving back into that practice, because honestly, like that's how I journaled for years. It was just whatever I felt like in the moment, whatever was meaningful in the moment, and it's really been nice to reconnect with that practice. So that was basically my February in a nutshell. A very, very long one. The things I got into, and my tarot journal or my fellowship journal, and the primary decks that I worked with throughout the month. As always, you'll find links for everything I've shown here in the description box of this video. I hope that you all had a wonderful February, and I wish you many blessings moving into March.